You know all of the people all over the internet who tell you how to start your own business and make a fortune? What if every single one of them was leading you astray and the reality of business startups was very different to how they portrayed it? Would that worry you? Well, I think it might. So I'm going to take you through why this is the case with some examples, and I'll show you how you can immunize yourself from the danger as you start your own business. So to get into this, let's start with explaining what we're talking about here, and we'll use the most famous example of them all. Hang in there because this is important. During World War II, the Allied Air Forces obviously wanted to reduce aircraft losses due to enemy fire. One solution, of course, was to reinforce the plane's armour, but where on the plane would the strengthening be most effective? They looked at the planes after they'd returned from missions, and their first idea was to add more armour to areas that suffered the most damage. This seems logical, right? But think again. A statistician called Abraham Vold pointed out that the reason the planes were being examined at all was because they'd managed to return from the raid. But what about all the planes who'd been shot down? Those were the ones to really learn from. This example perfectly displays the phenomenon known as survivorship bias. So to get back to your possible startup, I think you can now see the problems that might start to arise when you listen to all the gurus who say, I did it like this and it was successful, so you should too. We're looking at the successful example, but we're not taking into account the thousands of other users who are not followed by millions of people on YouTube. That's because, like those planes, they crashed and burned. But they have lessons to teach us too, and we rarely get to hear them. So what can we do? Well, let's go through ways that survivorship bias can affect us when we start a business, and I'll highlight the best way I can think of to take action to avoid the issue. But before we start, I want to make something completely clear. I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't start anything as a direct result of this factor. In fact, I'll let you into a secret. Number 5 talks a lot about this. What I'm saying is that you might make better decisions if you keep this factor in the back of your mind. Anyway, let's go and I'll list the danger arising from the topic and the way to try and avoid it. Number 1, unrealistic expectations. So this is believing that success is guaranteed because you hear about successful entrepreneurs, which can lead you to underestimating the risks involved. The way to reduce the effect of this is to conduct proper, thorough research into the market, then create a realistic plan that outlines the potential challenges and risks and works out the ways around them. Take advice from a range of experienced entrepreneurs who can provide a more balanced perspective. Okay, number 2, simply ignore the possibility of failure altogether. Avoiding the failure rates of new business because it feels in some way defeatist to even acknowledge that there's a possibility is a danger in itself. We get pummeled by reports of people who committed themselves beyond all measures of reasonableness and were a success as a result. It feels like you're throwing in the towel even mentioning the word. We can avoid this by checking in on the industry we're looking at and studying their industry specific failure rates. Then, more importantly, looking at the reasons why they failed. This will generate actionable methods by which you can avoid their fate. Number 3, copying successful models blindly. Trying to replicate the strategies and tactics of successful businesses is a good idea, but you have to be aware of the unique circumstances that that particular business had, including things like the market conditions when they started. For example, if you watch YouTube videos, you can see many instances of people who make the whole talking to camera and selling online thing easy. They often say it's only practice that made them so good. And to some extent, of course, they're right. Loads of practice is a prerequisite for success. But it's also easy to get the impression that these people just don't have any more talent than anywhere else and they've just put in a load of practice. In lots of respects, that just isn't correct. And I know this sounds like a cop-out and an excuse. And I'm not saying that practice isn't extremely important, but talent is a differentiator as well. So also, sometimes opportunities exist, but the market can become saturated or the target market changes wholesale. So to avoid this, yes, you're going to have to do a bucket load of practice, but also you should make sure that your approach is tailored fully to your specific market and customers' needs. Use successful businesses as an inspiration, but adapt their strategies to your own particular situation and market. Experiment with adapting business models if things are not developing as you would expect. Number 4, unrealistic timeline expectations. The problem here is that you can create an expectation in your mind of immediate success because you hear about rapid success with others. This leads to impatience and premature decisions, maybe to throw in the towel. Anything you've heard about online obviously has a major risk of this happening. Listen to the videos, read the websites, yes, but you can still easily adopt a realistic approach. It's quite simple to think through a timeline and play what if. What if it takes 6 months longer to get to the stage of success than I thought it might do? Would I get bored or run out of money? Even by thinking of these things, you're conditioning your mind that this is not a foregone conclusion. It's making you more resilient if, as is almost certain, things don't proceed exactly as you planned. So create a timeline that includes milestones and work out what your contingency plans are to manage your expectations and stay focused on the longer term. Okay, so number 5, the importance of failure. Avoiding failure at all costs due to the fear of being associated with unsuccessful businesses, this may actually prevent you from taking calculated risks. Yes, I know that this turns some of the gung-ho style issues I've mentioned above on their heads, but it's very easy never to do anything simply because there's a risk associated with it. But economists talk about opportunity cost of an action, and that is the cost of not doing it. In other words, you might avoid the risks associated with starting a business by not doing it, but you've also avoided the possibility of it all going really well and you enjoying your life much more as a result. To avoid it, you need to change how you think of failure, and there are screeds of things written about this, and I'm sure you already know the stories and the slogans, but failure isn't a disaster, provided you don't run away simply because it happened. It's just a stage on the road. Be open to trying new approaches and learning from your mistakes. So you can see there's an inherent problem with listening to all of the sales guys who paint success as a foregone conclusion. And the best way to think of it is survivorship bias. It can be a killer, but, and this is a key, you can use it to your advantage if you keep it in mind as you're drawing up your plans and make sure that it remains a factor. Anyway, I hope you found this useful. If you did, stick around. There's lots more good stuff to come.